This is the fifth Sunday of Lent, and this is sometimes called to ministers Nothing Sunday. It's like the doldrums of the Easter season, because next week is the one we're all waiting for. It's Holy Week, and it's also we get to break our fast if you're one of those people that do that kind of thing. I'm giving up Lent for Lent. But I'm a pagan, so that's what I do. But the thing is that it's not really the doldrums. In fact, the most interesting things happen. I'm going to do chalk talk here, but don't worry about it too much. This is just so that I can stay organized, because I've got a lot of facts today. And I am, by degree, a paleontologist and an archaeologist, and I have never made a penny out of those degrees, and so I'm only too happy to talk about new information that we know about Easter and about Passiontide. Anybody know what Passiontide is? It sounds like a beach thing. Passiontide is what we call the time of the Passion. Most of us think of the Passion of Christ as Holy Week. This is when we get to look at what happened to Jesus on the way to the cross, and then all the way up to the resurrection. We usually started at the sixth Sunday, and many places call the sixth Sunday Passion Sunday and Palm Sunday now, because that's when the action starts. That's when Jesus comes in, but the real action starts the week before. And so for many hundred years, the fifth Sunday was called Passion Sunday. And the reason we don't call it that anymore is because we focus on what we think passion means. And for most people, we translate passion in the way it's used during the Holy Week, is that we witness the suffering of Christ. The word in Latin is translated as suffering, but it's also translated as patience, and it's also translated as waiting. In Greek, pastio means something totally different. It means the pageant of Christ's life. It means the Pesach of the Passover. It means the story that we need to remember, not just about our suffering at the end, but also all of the events that led up to that suffering. So, passion not only means suffering, passion also means penance. It also means waiting. It also means a whole bunch of things that we don't think of as part of that. And because a few hundred years ago, the Pope, from some other religion, got rid of this week. And not only got rid of it, but if you practice what happens in this week or talk about it, you have to veil everything. You have to put veils over your candles. You have to. Why? Because what really happened during this week kind of points of fingers at the Romans, at the king of Judea, and at the priesthood in Jerusalem. And so it also talks about the importance of women in the church. And that is the reason that they say it's that you need to present this information, and if you have to do it veiled. We won't do that today. We're going to unveil what happened during that week. And it's important because while pain and suffering is something that we look at and we understand that a sacrifice was being made, we really don't understand what it was that led up to that and why it happened. So in order to understand that, I want you to imagine that there's a wall in the desert. And this is the east, and this is the west. And so, just so you're familiar here, this is what we'll call the West Bank. Okay, just so you have a reference, east and west. And there are two things that are important in this story. One is that there is a town called Jerusalem. Everybody knows that, right? There is also, outside of the town, a mount. Anybody know what mount that is? Olivet, the Mount of Olives, exactly. But it is also the Moriah. What is the Moriah? In order to understand the Moriah, you have to understand the law and the prophets. Anybody ever hear that phrase? You know what it means? So the law and the prophets are how the Old Testament is divided up. If you look at it, you're either looking at books about the laws and the rules, or the prophets and the lives of the prophets and what they prophesied. And so what happens during this fifth week is the culmination of the law and the prophets coming together. Not only that, it is the fulfillment of the prophecy when the Lord and the Christ, the Lord and the Christ become one. So we hear people say this all the time. Jesus our Lord, Jesus the Christ. The Lord and the Christ are titles. And the Lord and the Christ together are Messiah, or the Messiah. And the prophesied coming of the prophets have said that when the Lord and the Christ comes together, that we have a Messiah. And that's what happens this week. Or at least the setup, the conspiracy to make that happen. And who makes that conspiracy? Well, Jesus Christ. I'm not swearing. In this week, sets it up and declares himself the Lord and the Christ. What does that mean? Well, it means that he is the King of Israel. He is the King of Israel. He is the King of Jerusalem. You see, this is the kingdom of Judea. This is where Judah ruled. King Judah ruled. And this, on this side of the line, is where Israel is. Judah and Israel, a kingdom separated. So the king and the priest become one. The prophecies say that the king comes from the house of Judah and that the priests come from the house of Levi. And these prophets, beginning with Moses, who is actually the lawbringer, Moses becomes the Messiah when Aaron gives up the high priesthood. So there is the first Messiah. And there's a whole string of Messiahs, all right? So David, he unites the kingdom of Judah. Remember Saul? Saul and David. Saul dies, Jonathan dies, and David, for a while, unites the kingdom. In Samuel, we see that the king becomes the king of Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar destroys the united kingdom of Judah and Israel. Like that. Yeah, I think it'll say. So Nebuchadnezzar, and what happens is when Nebuchadnezzar comes here, the prophet is Daniel. And in order for these prophecies to keep going on, we bring ourselves to the week of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. Now, what we've recently found out is that where we think Jesus' tomb was is not where it was. And where Golgotha and where the Holy Sepulchre and where all kinds of things that we've believed for hundreds of years was, they weren't there. They were right in front of us all the time. And the reason that we don't know they're there is because that story was hidden from us in order to take the blame away from the people who were involved at the time. You see, during the week before Palm Sunday, Jesus was setting up the Romans and setting up the King Herod of Judah, or Judea, and setting up the high priest who was put in place by Herod, who is not the real house of Judah. He was a puppet king. And he's setting up the high priest, a man named Caiaphas, to arrest him. And how does he do it? He reads the law and the prophets, and he starts enacting all the pieces of the prophecy. And during that 1 week, he makes it so that the Romans have to do what they do. That Caiaphas, as the high priest, does what he has to do, and the Sanhedrin, which are like the Supreme Court, they have to do what they have to do. And he walks in, and they enact all of the things that were prophesied. So during this week, Jesus is in Mount Olive, and he's talking to all of these people. Who's he talking to? Well, Jesus is uniting. He has the idea that he can unite Judah and Israel. But not just Judah and Israel. He can unite the church that is Judaism here with the church that is Judaism here. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He believes that he can put together all of Israel. And not only all of Israel, but that all of Israel includes the women. You see, from the time that these religions began, there was no Judaism for women. Women had their own religion. And we know that because even when Moses left Israel and joined Aaron to become both high priest and the king, when he went to get the law, the people rebelled because it took him too long, and they wanted to bring the Messiah, so they erected a golden calf. Do you remember that story? Well, the person who was in charge of that insurrection was a woman named Miriam of Kadesh. Miriam is the sister of Moses and Aaron, and she is the high priestess of the religion of women. That's important because here, and in this time, the women's temple was attached to. All right, so here, if in the temple in Judea, right, where Herod is in charge, and Caiaphas is the high priest, and the Sanhedrin rule, all of this complex here was the Jewish religion in Judea at the time. Right here, the south gate, or the south wall, is the woman's temple. And the women here, they worshipped Asherah. Who's Asherah? Well, Asherah is Yoster, Astarte, Ishtar, Asheroth, under many, many, many different names, essentially the queen of the heavens and the mother of God. And that's who they worshipped. Who was in charge of this? Well, Herod was married to Herodias. Herodias was the high priestess, and her daughter was Salome. Anybody remember Salome? So remember that story when John the Baptist is railing against the whores of Babylon? He's talking about these women because they were sacred prostitutes, and they would, for an alms, sleep with men in order to enact what was called the Great Rite, which is a Babylonian and Egyptian and a matriarchal thing that used to happen. Well, at the time, we didn't know, up until now, that what Jesus was doing was when David and then Solomon after him unified these kingdoms, he went to the Mount of Olives, and there where the wheat threshing and the ore had laid bare in the lower Moriah, he built Solomon's temple. So Solomon built this temple, and in his temple, he had the women. And here, he also had a temple because Ruth, the Moabite, he married a Moabite, and so he made a temple for his grandmother, Ruth, and he made one for his wife, who was a Moabite, and then he made a temple for his other wife, who was an Ammonite, And then the Romans also, the women had their own religion, and they also had a temple. So the Mount of Olives had 4 women's temples that were all mother worshipers, and they were all interrelated. And so here, the Romans had a temple to the wife of Jupiter. Anybody know who the wife of Jupiter is? Okay, well, it's Juno. We don't talk about Juno. No, 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 no. If you have kids, you know what that means. All of this is the church that he had to unite that week in order to unite it to this church over here. This country to this country. This law to these prophets. The title of the Lord to the Christ. That's what's going on that week. So on Tuesday of that week, he realizes that the priest who is going to put all of this together is sick. Who is that priest? He's a man named Lazarus. And instead of going to Lazarus, he goes and continues to meditate. He continues to pray. He continues to go and talk to all of these women and his disciples. And Mary of Bethany says, hey, my brother is sick, he's dying. And he says, I know. And then Jesus lets Lazarus die. And then Jesus goes on about his business that week. And what's his business? Well, the first thing he's going to do is he plans his entry into the gate of Jerusalem. Why? Because when David went into Jerusalem, he rode a donkey. And real kings of Israel are not allowed to ride horses. So he said, go get a donkey. And then, in order to become the Messiah, there had to be a sacrifice of the red heifer. Only 9 times in the history of Judaism was there a sacrifice of the red heifer. And that happened whenever the Messiah had to come in order to save Israel. When did it happen first? It first happened when the golden calf was made. That's what was happening there. The red heifer was being sacrificed for the first time. And then that happened at a place called the Mifka, or the Mifsa. Where is that? Well, we didn't know, but it's 2,000 cubits outside of this temple here. So there's actually an altar where the red heifer takes place. We also know that Abraham sacrificed, or was going to sacrifice, his son Isaac. And they believed at the time that this was that spot, and that Isaac was spared. We know that David came and offered himself at this same place, and that the Temple of Solomon, we now know, was built on this place. So what was Jesus doing? Well, in the Old Testament, it says David wept for Israel. And so Jesus is here, and they are very, the gospel writers tell us that Jesus wept. They also tell us that Jesus did the things that Isaac did, because Jesus was going to be put on the altar by his father. You see, all this week, Jesus is preparing himself to fit all of the prophecies of all of these different religions and the mainstream Judaism that's being practiced in Jerusalem. because he is going to unite these two cultures, these two churches, these two genders, and he has this grand idea for his new church. The last thing that he does on Saturday is he raises Lazarus from the dead. Why is that important? Well, in Samuel, who is one of the prophets, we learn that when the red heifer is sacrificed, that God says to the people, you need to bring the sacrifice and sacrifice on the altar, and only one man can touch that, and that's the high priest, and that high priest, over here would be Caiaphas, but over here, it's, in Samuel's time, it is a man named Eleazar, or Eliezer. In Hebrew, Eliezer, or Eleazar, is high priest. In Latin, in Jesus' time, the name is Lazarus. So Lazarus is the high priest. And so when the Bible says that he is unclean, it doesn't mean that he's a leper. It means that in the way of Samuel, that when he slaughters the red heifer, he becomes unclean, and he becomes sick, and he dies. On Saturday, Jesus raises him from the dead. And what happens? Well, because Lazarus is the brother of Mary of Bethany and Martha, it has special significance to all of those women. And we've talked about this before, but have you ever noticed that everybody in the New Testament is named Mary? It's because Mary is not a name. Mary is a title. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is Mary Josephus. Mary, the mother of John the Baptist, is Elizabeth. Mary of Bethany, who may also be Mary Magdalene, we don't know. Mary, who is also called Martha. All of them are called Mary because at the time they were all called Miriam. Miriam is a title. They are honorary titles that are given because they take the place of Miriam of Kadesh. So Miriam, who was buried in Kadesh, is the mother of all of this religion over here attached to the temple, and all of her priestesses are named Mary. And when the high priest, the man who is the brother of two of them, comes raised from the dead, they all align themselves with Jesus. And when Jesus then goes into town the next day, he is proclaimed by all of these people and all of these people as a king. Hosanna, all the palm trees, everything happens. But Jesus also knows that when he comes back out, that he has broke into this place. And because he was the red heifer, he anoints rope with hyssop. He goes into their temple and he ritually cleanses their temple by whipping all of the moneylenders and driving them out. So essentially on the 6th day of the second new year, he goes into the capital and creates sedition. So why? Because he believes he's the president, king. And he goes in there and he does this seditious act and he comes back out and he goes to Gethsemane. Where's Gethsemane? That's the temple. And that's the place where it's prophesied that he's supposed to be. So he sits there and he waits. And in Holy Week, the Romans do what he planned and made them do. The Romans under Herod, Pontius Pilate gives Herod the power to be governor of this state. And they go and the Sanhedrin say, well, we're not in charge out here. And Caiaphas says, I'm not in charge out here. Well, Herod says, well, the heck with that. I'm going out there. We're going to arrest Jesus. Why? Because Jesus knows that where he's arrested is where they have to crucify him. And so he wants to be crucified as the sacrifice in this spot. Where's this spot? This spot is the place where it was believed that Adam's skull was buried, that possibly Moses' skull was buried, and that the place was called Golgotha or Calvaria or Calvary, which is the place of the skulls. And so he is crucified just as prophesied on the Mount of Olives, which is also Moriah, which is also the place of the sacrifice of, you see, all of this stuff was planned the week of the fifth Sunday. Charles Fillmore wrote about Lent, and he wrote this idea. You guys all know who Charles Fillmore is, right? Okay. And he tells us that there's actually 47 weeks of Lent, and that we've cut out the first 7 days of Lent because it was this bacchanalian orgy where all of the pagans and all of the women and all of the people could do whatever they wanted until they get into the 40 days of abstinence. And 40 days, they actually practice abstinence. They didn't just give up a fish or a meal or something. But there was massive meditation, massive prayers, massive giving up of stuff and sacrifice in that 40 days. And on the fifth Sunday, it was for meditation and prayer, and also before Passover, it was important to meditate and work it out, to work out the differences that you had with people, to settle the score, to pay your debts, to come together. And that's what Jesus was doing at the time. And he was creating this plan to bring everybody together. Now, we can debate whether or not he was successful, but that's what was happening on this week. And two things are important about that. The first is that everything that happened in the following week was happening because the people and the actors of that week were forced to act and do the things they had to do in order for Jesus to fulfill the prophecies of his own destiny, of his own sacrifice. The second reason that that's important is that his intention was to unify two religions, to unify a divide between the men and the women and the two separate religions of mother worship and father worship, and bring them together. To unify two countries, Judea and Israel. And you can add the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Samaritans and all of the people that ethnically and culturally believed that they were Israelites but were locked out of Judea. He wanted to bring them together. And he wanted to either create the chaos that would make that happen or create the final confrontation that would allow that to happen. It didn't matter when it happened, but it would happen. And it sort of has. But the intention at the time, from the fifth Sunday to the fifth Saturday, was to meditate, to pray, and to work out with all of the different parties, including these parties, because they were in communication, what had to happen. So as you can see, in order for this thing to happen, there was lots and lots of people involved, and there were a lot of good intentions, and there were a lot of things that did come out of it, so that on the other side of this, when the young church, when the Gnostics, when the early Christians came together, women became priests. The religion was international. The first bishop was on the Isle of Cyprus, and it was Lazarus. Anybody of any race or creed or color or status could belong to it. Every single person within that church believed that they had a direct connection to God and did not have to go through a Bible or through a ritual or through a religion, that they had gnosis. It was this radical thing at this radical time. And it was because people of different status came together, people of different genders came together, people of different churches came together in unity. So what does that mean to us today? So, hey, Ray, you want to noodle on the piano for a bit? It's my meditation music. All of this information is esoteric, and it might be interesting to some of you. Some of you might have gone asleep while I was talking. But the point underneath it is about what was happening before all of that suffering. Because another meaning of passion is patience. Another meaning of passion is peace. Another meaning of passion is pageant, is watching, is listening. You know, what we have unfolding in this week, if you put this week back into Passiontide, is you have a Greek tragedy. And in that Greek tragedy, it starts out where you know the end of the story. Because pastio and pathos and passion also mean grief. This is the week of grief. I want you to think about that in real terms, not in historical terms. Here we sit in this beautiful church, and some of you have left your beautiful church, and two churches are uniting, and they're going to go and be somewhere else. And while it is exciting to have that kind of a resurrection and that kind of a coming together, and that this solves so many mutual challenges that both of these congregations have, all of you come from this history of your own congregation and your own places. And this is a week of grief. I want you to meditate. I want you to pray on the things that need to go away, and the things you need to remember, and the things that you need to leave behind, and the things that you need to take to the other side, to the other place. And I want you to work it out. I want you to work out the new people that you will be with, the new place that will be unfamiliar to you. I want the springtime of this new chapter of these congregations that are going to become one congregation to never forget where they came from. And like Jesus, I'd like to believe that each of you has a destiny within this. That each of you has a place in the new place. And that everything that brought you to this place or the other place that will be sold, that all of the things that you need to take from here and there and bring to the new place, that you not only bring it there, but you bring it to share, that you bring it to create unity, that the walls between the two different places and the two different peoples and the two different congregations become one. And there will be challenges, and there will be hiccups, and there will be mistakes. But if you take the time before the suffering to work it out, to watch the pageant, to understand the workings, that things need to be what they need to be, and that things die, and that things need to be sacrificed, and that things need to die in order for new things to be born. And that the sacrifices that you make now may not be known and felt from generations from now. And that is the most important thing I want you to think about and feel. Because this week is about pathos. And pathos is part of that pageant that has to do with experiencing feelings, experiencing the grief, but also experiencing the rightness of what is happening in your life. And also know that pathos is shared. That the word sympathy comes from pathos, sympathos. The word empathy comes from empathos. But also I want you to know that the word apathy also comes from pathos. When we forget unity, when we forget that we are empathetic and we belong and that we are one and that we are together, we can create apathy. Apathy creates fear. Fear creates anger. Anger creates confrontation. All kinds of things happen. Most of it can be prevented if you find peace within yourself before you come together. And once these places are sold, and once the new place is built, will you be ready to move in, not to a new church, but to a new paradigm, a new you, a new kind of unity, one that is not just the name of your church, but an actual thing that you created, that you made happen in ways that other cultures have been unable to do for thousands of years. This is the week when you work it out. I thank you for your attention. Namaste. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.